Okay, good morning. I am Meredith Daugherty, and this is Linda Banares, and we are here to present about building your village. I am the Area 31 Outreach Coordinator for Special Olympics of Virginia, as well as a SATB2 parent to Joseph, who is age 9. We received his diagnosis at age 6.5 after a very, very lengthy search, and we've recently moved to a new community. I've been actively searching for our place and our people. Yesterday we saw in the afternoon presentation, it takes a village to raise a child, it takes an army to cure one. But in this presentation, we're gonna help you build that village. Parenting in this world is challenging enough without the added pressures and coordination required for the special needs child. Society is built for the neurotypical family without challenges or differences. However, it's more important for our children to obtain and maintain sustaining and social supports early in life for their continued success and easy natural transitions later in life. Before we continue, I want you to keep two things in mind. I'm sure, like a lot of you, I definitely had dreams for my unborn Joe, the Joe that hadn't met the world yet. He didn't have these additional mountains to climb. I had hoped that my 3 youngest boys would be the 3 musketeers, the 3 amigos, best friends for life. And it's just not that easy to realize now with all the challenges that Joe has. I have the 2 musketeers and Joe, and the 2 amigos and Joe. And we refer to them as the boys and Joe. I've had to mourn those dreams, as I'm sure we've all had to do. I've had to recognize how difficult that has been and where we are now. And I have adjusted and found ways to incorporate those adjusted dreams in a way that bonds our family, but it also honors the spirit I hope that my boys continue. We'll talk about some of those adjustments later on. Additionally, I'd like you to consider 3 very important words: accessible, accommodation, and inclusivity. They're 3 very different ideas. Accessible is proactively making an environment available for everyone. Think built-in ramps that are already there. Accommodating is a reactive way, usually per request, of eliminating barriers through poor design. Think added ramps, metallic ramps, or added elevators to buildings that need to be retrofitted. Inclusivity is a welcoming environment for all, encompassing both accessibility and accommodation. And that's what we're wishing for all of you. Linda?
All right. So my name's Linda Banares. Our family's from California. I'm the mom of 2 kids, a 10-year-old and an 8-year-old. My 10-year-old is my SAS kiddo, Joshua. I serve as one of the family support reps for California for the Gene Foundation, and I also work part-time as a clinical pharmacist. So the question just brought up at the end of the last presentation: what can we do as families to help our kids and help our community? This presentation gets right at the heart of that in terms of resource engagement and community connections. So we plan to cover some key main federal and state programs that we have found particularly helpful, review some local organization considerations, and also go over some travel resources. Community connections will be woven throughout, where community can either be thought of as physical or more abstract. It could be your local geographic area, your child's school, an online or social media platform, the SATB2 Foundation, family, friends, service providers. All of those constitute your village. This present seeks to increase awareness of resources at the government and community levels, ultimately increase opportunities for fun, because as you feel more supported, you will have more time for self-care and more time to plan trips and outings that will create positive memories for you and your family as you have more exposure to activities. Accessing resources can be a huge game changer for your whole family. It has been for us. They can provide financial assistance, even generate income in some circumstances, increase disability access to desired activities. As we put this presentation together, I realized this very amazing relationship between resource engagement and community connections, where at a minimum, I think this relationship is additive, if not synergistic. An example for us, about 6 years ago, before Joshua was diagnosed, so he was around 3 in the preschool stage, we were at a neighborhood restaurant, and I see a young boy, several years older than he is, with 2 women at the breakfast table. And this young man has a communication device in front of him. At that time, I didn't know about AAC devices, but I knew that Josh was nonverbal, and I was eager to connect with others who might be in a similar situation. So I approached these strangers at the table and just introduced myself and asked about the device. I find out it's his talker. I find out one of the women is his mother and the other is an ABA therapist. So also an area I had never heard about. The mother and I exchanged numbers, we went out for coffee, and over those about probably 2.5 hours, she shared a lot about their experiences in the school system, what an IEP is, the individualized education program, and things they had learned along the way, the challenges, and some victories as well. She put me into contact with a nearby school district's special education PTA. Very unique, I think, to have a special education PTA. They're a very vibrant group. So I met with the PTA president. I took her out to breakfast, as a thank you for her time. She was happy to share with me new insights into organizational leadership and further insights into the educational environment. She then invited me to a disability awareness advocacy talk where I learned more about the IEP and then just got more into this general advocacy mindset that I would find would serve me very well in these next few years. So a few more years go by, starting to apply these things I'm learning from others, and then approached to take on the parent chair role for our special education parent advisory committee in our school district. And I would not have been ready for that undertaking had it not been for these people who had poured their resources and time to help us. So very much that close relationship with resource engagement, community connections. It's not that you have to start with one or the other. You will find that they naturally build upon one another. In this presentation, we do not seek to cause any guilt, undue stress, or unhealthy comparisons. I know me, even on my best day, I'm riding this very fine line between feeling like I have it pretty well together and being a complete mess. On the other hand, this journey is truly a marathon, it's not a sprint. I frequently come back to the biblical concept of my goal to finish the race, complete the task set before me, so just trying to stay that course. This presentation also is not designed to be an end-all detailed how-to for all resources. You will see there's a lot of interstate variability, but we do hope that this will help you find that right for you way to engage in these resources. So some general strategies when it comes to government programs. That's the area we're gonna start with. First off, you need to know what is out there. So the internet can be a great friend to you in this. Your primary care provider can be an excellent source for referrals. The SAPV2 Foundation with their Family Support Network and the SAPV2 Facebook page, also great resources. I have found that therapists like the speech therapist, OT, PT, they are connected with other families in your community with similar types of needs, so they are great individuals to bounce ideas off of. If you do a quick internet search or start talking to others, you will find that there are advocates to help you through the IEP process. There are disabilities rights organizations. What I love about these is often they'll take big pieces of legislation and put them into layman's terms. They might have a nice FAQ sheet. They might be providing in-person or virtual webinars to help you navigate the process as well. So then the next step, once you've identified, is to apply for access to these services. Please do not be afraid to ask for help. You will find that filling out the forms, navigating the system can be very arduous, but there are folks and departments there that are available as resources. Whenever you speak with an individual representing a program, I recommend documenting the conversation. So the person you're speaking to, the time, place, and date of the conversation, and then really importantly, getting from them what is my next step. So bringing out a tangible that you can act upon to help you keep moving forward. Then when you get to the interview, that's a great sign because that means you are potentially eligible for a service. So I learned this from Stephanie Watkins 6 years ago at our first SATB2 conference. You want to present the hardest days with your child during that interview. I also encourage you to listen carefully. So an example of the importance of this came when I was applying to be a paid caregiver through our in-home supportive services under the Medicaid waiver in California. And during this interview with the social worker, she was asking, what type of safety measures do you have to take for Joshua? And she told me up front, if you tell me that you have locks that are higher than he can reach, or you've put alarms in the windows so you'll know if he elopes, I won't be able to count that as a precaution. And so what it really came down to in that interview was showing the need for protective supervision. So that's a great term to jot down, protective supervision. That means that your child needs 24/7 care to prevent harm to self and to others. And when you can show that, that means he or she needs an adult individual at their side all the time, morning and night, to ensure their safety. And then next, be ready to possibly be able to negotiate for more. A lot of times, things are presented to you in a very black and white manner, but when it comes to the interview, you may find that there is some gray area, and oftentimes there is room for professional judgment from that intake personnel, oftentimes a social worker. So before I had heard about respite, I saw it on the SATB2 Facebook page, people commenting about respite hours. So I jotted down, there were maybe 7 or 8 responses from folks from all over the country saying how many hours they were getting for respite. So I took that to our regional center social worker and asked if Josh would qualify. He was happy to give that to us. His first offer was, how about 30 hours per quarter? So that's about 10 hours per month. But every response in that SATB2 thread had been more hours. So I just presented to him the numbers that others were reporting, and then he had no problem with giving us the max 90 per quarter, 30 per month that was allowed at that time. Now it's up to 120 per quarter in California. So just be ready for those opportunities to negotiate for more and use what you've heard here to say, like, this is what others are getting in other areas. And then lastly, stay flexible and on alert for changes because grant funding can change, new opportunities can arise. So we're going to get into some specific government programs here. Just a real quick bit on SSI. I know a lot of us have younger children and haven't applied for this yet. So this is a federal program that provides monthly payments to adults and children with limited income and resources. The reason why a lot of our families will not qualify for their child less than 18 is that when they are less than 18, the income and resources of the family members in the child's household are considered as part of that asset estimation. When they turn 18, however, then they are looked at as an individual. And then the family members' income and assets are not looked at. And that is why a lot of us with children 18 or above will qualify for SSI. So again, knowing that there's often gray area and things can be vague, I went ahead and applied for our family in California because I thought the language for the California program maybe gave a little bit of leeway. I got turned down, but I saved that rejection letter in a file so that when Josh turns 18, I will remember to reapply for him. I think the amount is generally about $1,000 per month for that monthly payment. That can vary depending if states are contributing to the federal amount. So I think the federal amount is less than $1,000, and then with the state addition that may occur, it could be a little bit over $1,000 a month. Medicaid, different than SSI, actually does allow a waiver program for individuals less than 18. So this was created to allow But Medicaid can be available to all individuals, young and older. But when it comes to the children less than 18, definitely look into this Medicaid waiver for your state. So you could Google, home and community-based services federal waiver program for your state. It was created with the value being placed on keeping our kids at home and in the community as long as possible, rather than going into an institutional setting. There are a lot of state-to-state differences in eligibility, application, and extent of benefits. For instance, terminology may be different. In California, it's called institutional deeming. There can be lengthy wait lists, so you might qualify, but you might find yourself on a several-year wait list. You can end up, after approval, having a no-cost or share-of-cost Medicaid plan. If your child already has primary insurance, then they would end up with dual insurance coverage if they get the Medicaid waiver, where typically your primary insurance will be billed for a service first. If there's a portion that's not covered, then that's what Medicaid can pick up, or a portion of. If your primary insurance denies something, then Medicaid could pick that up. So the mandatory services that every state must supply are hospital, physician, lab, and x-ray services. The optional ones are things like prescription drug coverage, case management, and supportive services like speech, OT, PT. So it will vary depending on the state. Another great thing about the Medicaid waiver is it may open the door to become a paid caregiver. So let's talk about respite and caregiving. Respite is when a caregiver is paid so that you can have respite, which is rest. Another category is the personal care attendant or assistant, where a caregiver, which could be the parent in some states, is paid to assist with activities of daily living and help ensure safety measures are in place, that protective supervision. Other terms you can look up would be like Community First Choice Option. That is a program that was established in 2010 under the Affordable Care Act. But you want to research your state-specific programs. There is a lot of variability because Medicaid is jointly funded with matching federal and state funds, and states are given substantial flexibility to administer the program as they see fit. All right, so now moving into some of the lighter topics, and also, I know I'm going really quickly. The PDF of these slides is available on the Zoom events platform, and I believe all of these presentations will be available as well for viewing through October 31st. All right, so moving into these lighter topics, the parking placard. Those of us who have a parking placard know how great it is. A friend who encouraged me to do this told me it's the difference of being able to make dinner. And I found that to be so true. We all know how taxing it can be on our kids when we're doing multiple errands and going to the grocery store, in and out of the car, but being that much closer to the door can make all the difference for that day. So look to your state's DMV for their specific form and criteria. In general, the qualifiers will focus on physical limitations, but I recommend consider listing it all. So I had another SATB2 friend in our area who was denied twice. She had to apply 3 times before getting it. The first time she applied, she only put in the diagnosis free text box, which was the only box, for the individual or the guardian to fill out, was regarding diagnosis. So she put SATB2 associated syndrome. Most likely the reviewer had no idea what our syndrome is. And so that's why I say just list it all. Anything that relates to safety and impairment considerations, just to give a fuller picture of the disability and the need. Make a photocopy of this as well as any other application you submit. You never know if it could be a resource for others or if you have to reapply. I think once you have obtained one or more of these resources, whether it's a Medicaid card or a parking placard, you will find that opportunities to access more activities just start opening up. So I've listed a few of the types of venues that often have, sometimes have discounts for disabilities. They are not always advertised, so looking at the website's FAQs or searching the website for the term disability, sometimes that can uncover discounts. I find that these places are also generally very welcoming and accommodating to families with special needs. I want to point out one particular program that our family has really enjoyed. It's America the Beautiful National Parks and Federal Recreational Lands Passes. What's great about this is it gives you free admission to any of the hundreds of parks that fall into this category throughout the country. It's free to obtain. What you do is you get a pass, and then everyone in the vehicle of the pass holder gets into the park for free. And you can also get discounts on added expanded amenity fees. So our family loves to camp, and usually we'll get about a 50% discount for campsite reservations. It does require physician documentation to obtain, but it's a very straightforward application. So I think this is a great one to start with if you live here in the US. And I see it as like low-hanging fruit. It's an easy one to fill out and a great place to start. State parks also have some pass access programs worth looking into for your state. The school district slide here, this is going to be our transition slide where I'll hand it over to Mayor in a moment, but we each wanted to touch on a few things about school district considerations. I want to encourage you to be those boots on the ground in your child's school or classroom. I know there are a lot of limitations that could be present if your child's in a self-contained classroom. They may have strict restrictions on parent presence there, but maybe there are other opportunities like a field trip or a class party that you could help with, helping in the library. I know also a lot of us work full-time and it's hard to make the time for it, but I think again, even if it's just a one-time thing in the year that you can get to, it's time well spent. The reason I say this is because that face-to-face interaction allows you to connect with the students your child is connecting with, the teachers and the staff involved in their education. I've witnessed some amazing acts of kindness towards Joshua that I would have had no idea that the kids had this leaning towards helping others. And that's allowed me then to go up to them later, thank them for their kindness. And I think all of that really adds to that inclusive practice environment we want for our children in their schools. I mentioned at the beginning, I had the opportunity to take on chair of our Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, or CPAC. And this has been very interesting because now, once I felt comfortable with Josh's IEP advocacy for him at an individual level, this has then brought me to another level of thinking about how can we improve access and resources for all kids with special needs and learning differences in our school district. I encourage you, what I found helpful here in this kind of role, as you get the opportunities to interface with district leadership and administration, to one, try to keep it positive. It's very common, I think, as parents to feel like we are at odds with the school if we're not getting what we feel our child needs. But we actually have a lot of common ground. And if we can show them our understanding that they are working under limited resources, I think they're a lot more willing and ready to collaborate with us as well. We do a lot of activities in our CPAC, including educational events and social events. At one of the earlier socials, parent and caregiver socials at the beginning of this past school year, a new family had come into town and they were saying, it'd be great if there was like a WhatsApp group, something like that, where we could all connect about these things. And to be honest, I was hesitant when she brought that up. I wasn't ready to volunteer to take that on. I was worried it was just going to become this platform where we would just all be complaining together. But I'm really glad that another mom saw the need and believed in the cause and then took it on. And it's actually, this WhatsApp group has just been the most amazing resource in our district for families where we can talk openly and share resources. And it's really shown me it is much better to share out what we're learning about with others rather than just keeping it to ourselves, because collectively we truly can advocate much more effectively for change. So with that, thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Mayor.
All right, thank you. That was pretty informative. Thank you. Okay, so I will pick up from the same slide. So we're going to circle to the school involvement. as she was saying, don't be afraid to say yes to what benefits you as well. Our school offers teachers a once a month sort of respite for themselves as an additional planning period during their recess hours. Joe is still in elementary school. He's got one more year left. And I don't work outside the home yet. And so I go and volunteer, and I have been able to connect with the kids, with the teachers. They know who I am. They see me. They're like, hey, Ms. Daugherty. Like, the kids know who I am. And sometimes I get, hey, Joe's mom. And I'm like, hey, Joe's classmates. And so they know who I am. I'm a very familiar face. And in a minute, I also have a uniform, and you'll see it in a second, that I use. But this opportunity has allowed me to visit Joe's schools during hours. I interact with his peers myself. I interact with other parents and teachers, and I get a better connection with the school and my son's place in it. We have recently moved to that community. We've been there about 2 years. Pre-COVID, we were in a different area. During COVID, we were in another different area. And now I'm trying to reestablish in a post-COVID era, and it's very complicated. But these connections have led to conversations regarding social events at the school, like trunk or treat, family movie night. They are not inherently good for our children. They're very loud, they're very noisy, they're very crowded, and Joe just does not do well in that. But I've been working with the parents to make them more accommodating and inclusive for Joe and his peers, such as making a quiet space, letting them go first, making separate viewing spaces for the movie so the kids can move around without their peers staring at them. Putting myself out there in these very small ways has made a monumental impact in our overall happiness and sense of community in our new town. We see people at restaurants. And I know some people, they don't like that. They want to go and they want to be anonymous. I kind of enjoy feeling a part of something. By becoming involved in the school, it allows your child's voice to be heard on the social level, not just the academic level with the IEP that Linda was talking about, but you're reaching the parents of the students that your child interacts with every day. They might not even know that your child comes into their classroom. They might not even be aware that there are needs inside the school for quiet accommodations and separate spaces. But usually I have found, once they're aware, more than willing to help, because they too want a better environment for their child of inclusivity and kindness. So before I move forward, I want to touch on the Googling. Google has been an invaluable resource, and it can be, but it can also be kind of crazy. It's not actually touched up there. When my daughter was in 7th grade, she was given a project, and she was sent home a list to do a research project on an animal. She chose the Black Panther. This was pre-Wakanda, pre-MCU, but still a little touchy. When I asked her for permission to tell this story, she said, of course, and when she relayed the story, she reminded me that when she came home, she told us, I'm gonna do the Black Panther. My response was, is that approved? And she said, yeah, it's on the list. I said, okay. You might wanna consider a backup animal, but okay. One school day, one Google search later, she comes home and announces she's doing a project on a river otter. The Google search did not lead her to the Black Panther superhero, it led her to Malcolm X. And they decided that that was maybe not the right situation for a 7th grader. So they're not the animal really that they were looking for. So when you are doing your Google searches, keywords are vital to getting the information that you need. Again, inclusive, adaptive, and accessible are going to be very important for you. Outside of the school time, some families focus on sports, and so looking for inclusive sports teams, you need to consider your child's ability, whether they can collaborate with a team or whether they would prefer more solo sports. There are different types of team sports. Basketball is very fast-paced, soccer a little bit slower, baseball a little bit slower than that. You need to consider whether your child has the processing abilities for balls moving, or golf, where you move the ball and then you go chase it. Joe's better suited for that, not super well suited for tennis. There are other team sports that you have solo participation with team collaboration. Bowling, track and field, swimming. Our children are very, very well suited for doing these types of activities as long as they're safe and there can be some accommodations. Joe bowls. He bowls with Special Olympics. He uses a ramp and bumper guards. He can't participate in the actual summer games or fall games yet because he uses ramps and bumper guards. But he's 9, and eventually those skills will come. But we've made those accommodations, and he's in the sport, and he loves it. The same is true for music, theater, dance groups, anything your child is interested in, there's something out there. Not every community has them, and it's very unfortunate. But if you call and ask, if you find a group, say you have another sibling in a dance troupe, there are ways that are possible that these can be done for you. Older students can sit in and be a big buddy. Oftentimes, their tuition will be reduced if they volunteer inside the studio as a teacher's assistant or a big buddy or a helper. Sometimes they get offered volunteer hours for graduating high school. I know in Virginia, the students are required to have 100 hours, at least in our district, are required to have 100 hours of community service before they graduate high school. This is a really good way for older teenagers, not even siblings, if you don't have siblings or if they're not interested, but other students can come and help your child in a non-obtrusive kind of way. Adaptive instruments and instrument add-ons, I'm skipping around, I'm sorry. Adaptive instruments and instrument add-ons are very simple accommodations that can overcome the physical limitations while still allowing music lessons and success. But your involvement or lack thereof can also be very key here. You can be willing to be present or not, depending on your child's ability and the organization's standards. Some dance companies would prefer parents to sit out of class. You sit on a one-way mirror and you can see in, and they cannot see you. An alternative, as I mentioned, would be to have the buddy system with an older student. The same would be for scouting organizations, like Girl Scout, Boy Scout, Cub Scout, Sea Scout. If you've never heard of Sea Scouts, it is co-ed Boy Scouts on the water. They are usually paired with Coast Guard, and they are in a lot of coastal areas and some around the Great Lakes here. They fall under the BSA umbrella, and they're pretty fantastic. My daughter went very far in them, and she absolutely loved it. But they offer family camp. You can go sailing on the boat with your child. They can learn how to sail and water safety. I think we're all familiar with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts and what they do, but they also offer family camp, which is the ability for family to camp with the Scouts for some period of time, as long as it doesn't impact badge progress. And there again, a buddy, an older Scout, someone working on their Eagle badge, they would be an excellent pair for one of our children so that our children can still participate and get out there and be a part of a community of their own. And they can build relationships on their own outside of us. Haha. I am not getting this to move. I am hitting the green. Perfect. Awesome. So local organizations in the community. More specialized organizations would be Special Olympics, which has as much involvement as your family would like. This can continue into adulthood with easy transitions seasonally. That is an organization that I'm very involved in. I'm on our committee, but you can be a cheerleader, you can be a volunteer, you can be a parent, you can drop off and walk away. Depending on the sport, there are lots of different ways for you to be involved and you to get a community. There's also, Special Olympics has also been pretty wonderful for my children, my neurotypical children. My other 2 boys that I mentioned before, they're 14 and 11. And just last week, we had our end of the year banquet with Special Olympics, and I walked in and I looked at them and I said, guys, this is an opportunity for humility and service. We are here to help and serve food and to take care of others. And I grew up a Methodist preacher's child. I had built-in opportunities to serve my community. I was there all the time. Every Sunday, every week, we were there, my brother and I, side by side, helping people. Because of the way that our life works, and you understand that, I don't have as many built-in opportunities in my life. My attention is on Joe, mostly. And so this is a good opportunity for my children to kind of see the neurotypical community, the adults that don't have to be, they choose to be involved in our special needs community. And I think it's vital for my children, for building well-rounded children. But Special Olympics can continue into your adult. So Joe started at 8, you can continue on until you want to stop. The Friendship Circle is another group, and it's national, and it pairs special needs children with teen volunteers. My son Duncan, 14, is one of the teen volunteers, not with Joe, but with another child. They eagerly participate in the activities alongside the child. With this organization, the family also has to be with the pair. We do things every month. We've gone to a science museum. We've gone to an indoor sporting arena. We learned that Joe likes to carry the soccer ball. He doesn't like to kick the soccer ball. We've gone to botanical gardens. We've done petting zoos. There are so many opportunities that we get every month to go and participate and enjoy. And you would think some teenagers, you'd be like, maybe they'll, talk to each other, play on their phone. That has not been our experience at all. We have had a horde of boys around Joe, excited and wanting to talk to him and wanting to get to know him. And they are just as curious about this condition as most adults that I have encountered. Next slide. I've lost my clicker. Perfect. Okay. While not everyone is religious, some of us find comfort and community within our worship family. And each religious institution is incredibly personal. Before finding one for yourself, decide what you need. Our family needs a strong youth group, scouting organizations within the church. We need social events, and we need small adult groups for my husband and I. I also prefer traditional service. That comes from my upbringing. Some families would feel safer with a medical staff or a medical personnel on site. One of our old churches had a nurse that came every week that offered her services if necessary, which was important one day when one of the choir members had a heart attack in the choir loft. Some people like a children's church. Some people need a quiet room with the streaming services, with the services streamed in from the sanctuary. Whatever you think might help you feel comfortable, ask. I can't tell you the number of times I've attended church in the fellowship hall while watching the sanctuary services streamed in, and Joe's playing with cars on a table, just squealing and happy as a clam. I'm getting my worship, he's getting his fun, and everybody's happy. You can consider setting up a meeting or a phone call with the religious leader or the children's program leaders in advance of a visit. If possible, you can discuss your concerns and accommodations, elevators, family restrooms, and what you do if those aren't available. Is there a restroom that's more private? You can consider attending a low-stress public event, like a vacation Bible school or a community picnic. Get to know the people and find your comfort zone before attending a service. Haha. Okay, so here's where the uniform comes in. My husband jokes that that I don't look like myself unless I'm wearing ears. I vacuum the house in my ears because it makes me happy. So as you can see, I'm not just about personal community, but also about traveling community. Obviously, we've all traveled to get here, and hopefully it went without a hitch. There are ways to make it easier and places that are inherently inclusive. TSA Cares is one special program that provides assistance for medical and special needs passengers inside the airports. Some airports offer, like MCO in Orlando offers lanyards with sunflowers on it. If you are comfortable with being visible in that kind of environment, a lot of our disabilities are invisible, but if you are comfortable being visible, the sunflower lanyard alerts staff to your needs before you have to. It varies from airport to airport. Some smaller airports, like our Richmond airport, doesn't offer much. An attendant can help with security check, gate check, baggage claim, etc. TSA pre-check is different. It requires pre-authorization in advance of making the reservation. You have to make an appointment at home. You go somewhere, it's almost like getting a passport. They do a background check, they give you a number, and when you make your airport reservation, you take that personal number, KTN number, and you put it into your reservation, and then they know you are earmarked as somebody, and all the minors with you are earmarked as somebody that can go straight through security without having to stop. It's fabulous. Each adult needs to complete the pre-check. You need to indicate your identification number. Quick word about pre-boarding. A lot of you had to fly to get here. Hopefully you did this. If you didn't, here's a tip for on the way home. If you're flying with another adult, hopefully you are, consider whether you can keep your child out in the airport without their stroller or wheelchair for 20 to 40 minutes before the flight. And the other adult can go in and get you set up. They can do the pre-boarding. Your child does not have to be pre-boarded in order for you to take advantage of it. The other adult can go in, get the tablet, the snacks, the cup, the seat, whatever you need to feel comfortable in that airplane, go do it. You keep the child out, and that saves you 20 to 40 minutes of a flight time. I was telling Heather earlier, our flight from Virginia to Orlando to go to Disney World is an hour and a half. If Joe has to sit on the airplane for 40 minutes in pre-board, that is half of our flight time. And I have increased his time on the airplane and my stress level by 33%. Not doing that. I'm stressed out enough as it is. All right, amusement parks. Woo! Okay, so they're my favorite. Obviously, Joe has a thing for roller coasters. Our ability to take advantage of the disability rider programs has allowed his brothers to call skipping lines Joe's superpower. They often argue about who gets to be his riding buddy. We are an odd number of people. There's 5 of us. Somebody has to sit separately. Oh darn, it's usually me. So check online before attending the park. That information is very clearly provided in the FAQs, in search bars, disability programs. Accessibility is usually the umbrella that it's under. Most parks have a disability rider program that allows guests to wait outside the line, but each program varies by the park. Some need to be applied for in advance of the visit. Six Flags, Universal, Cedar Fair, which is just across the lake here, they utilize a third-party system that requires medical personnel to write a note of intent stating why the person can't wait in lines. It's not a medical diagnosis. HIPAA is not in play here. They are only asking why you can't wait in a line. For reference, they usually ask, what do you do in a grocery store? What do you do in other circumstances where your child has to wait in a line that is inevitable? What do you do? My response, I usually don't. He sits in the car. All right, last one. Okay, lastly, when you build a village, it isn't just for your child. You are very important too. She was stating respite care. There is a group, it's a national organization called A Mother's Respite. They offer bed and breakfast options for free or reduced rate across the country at specified times. Their website can direct you to the resorts near you. I have one not far from me. Interaction isn't required. Solitude is encouraged. It's about you and your needs, whatever they may be. They offer women's retreats, men's retreats, couples retreats. Sometimes they offer specific, if you are an autistic family or if you are an adult, you're a caregiver for an adult, sometimes they are very specific in but the kids are not allowed to come. Buddy Cruise is another organization. They offer autism and special needs family cruise plus conference, and it offers a family-oriented relaxation as well as a conference-style education. It'd be a great introduction to family cruising to see if this would be a good fit for you. The all-inclusive nature of the cruise with the security of having safety of the room just at hand. That's important for us, knowing that I can just whisk Joe off if he has a little bit too much. The SAT-B2 Gene Foundation offers state representatives and family connections, casual meetups, parent webinars, as well as grants for clinic in Arkansas, medical equipment grants, and obviously this amazing conference every 2 years. It's also an invaluable resource for medical practitioners and caregivers regarding the SAT-B2 diagnosis. SIB shops. Some of our children experienced yesterday the sibling workshop held here at the conference. This can continue to be a resource at home if you did not know that. Their website is filled with advice on how to help a sibling of a child with special needs, as well as offer times and locations for in-person and virtual meetups and support groups. It provides siblings of kids with disabilities with peer support and important information in a lively recreational setting. All right, and we reached the end. This is just the tip of the iceberg of what's available. Remember to consider what you're needing, accessible, accommodation, or inclusive, and what activities you might need. The village will eventually build itself around you. And I think we have a few minutes for questions if you.
Yeah. Do we have a mic? So we have some questions. I did want to, ask Stephanie Watkins if she wanted to say a few words about the ABLE account. That's a question that sometimes comes up that we didn't have time to include in this presentation. If Stephanie feels comfortable coming up to the open mic. And then if anyone has additional questions, maybe you can line up behind her to make it most efficient before we get cut off.
Yeah, we're gonna get cut off.
Oh, we might need to turn it on.
Testing.
So the ABLE account it's in with the college savings accounts is how our government has set it up. It's not in every state. If your state does not have one, you are allowed to sign up in another state, open up an account. It's basically an online savings account. One of the main requirements is you have to be receiving supplemental security income. It's a needs-based account. So basically for our kids to get services, right, they have to remain poor to get adult services, which means they can't have anything in their name. So they can have up to $2,000 like in a bank account. I'm forgetting the term of that, but like basically like accessible income in their, to their like disposable income. There are a ton of rules around it, like to get supplemental security income. And if anybody has specific questions, I'm going to post some things on the Facebook page so like you guys can dig into it. But if you were to qualify, say for example, you qualified for a waiver in your state under the age of 18, say your child's not going to qualify because your income level's too high, but there is a waiver. In our state, there was an autism waiver, and Noah qualified for that when he was probably about 6 years old. Then that automatically got him signed up for supplemental security income and Medicaid, right? Like it waived our income and just looked at him as an individual at the age of 6. So we could have at that point opened an ABLE account. There's a lot of benefits. If there's something that's going to cause them to kind of go over that $2,000 threshold, it's a way to kind of tuck money in. One of the concerns with it, one of the things to be really careful about is depending on the state, there's what's called a Medicaid payback, which if Medicaid is paying for any services for your child, if your child passes, then they can take all of the money in that ABLE account back. So you want to be strategic about it and put in there specific funds for specific reasons often. Some states don't have the payback. So I have a family that I work with and they don't use the Maryland ABLE account. They use another state because that state doesn't have a payback. So I don't know all the details of how that works, but I will post information about the ABLE account. The other thing I wanted to bring up, something that Todd and I did when our kids were little. Noah is the oldest of 4. And we had 4 kids in 5 years, not really very smart, probably. We were always exhausted. And we had the blessing of living next door to my parents, but my mom worked full time. My dad was not very good with the kids. We found that when we had babysitters, we needed 2 babysitters because Noah's behaviors at the time, he was super attention seeking. So he would do every single thing he could to get the attention of the babysitter because he couldn't use his voice. So it was always like, trouble. Like he was tearing things apart, pulling flowers out of the flower bed, then, breaking things inside the house. And so we quickly realized we had to have 2 sitters. Well, by the time we walked out the door before our date began, now this was 15, 20 years ago, we had already spent over $100. And we were like, this is crazy. We can't afford to go on a date because just the childcare alone. So we were very involved in our church. We were really fortunate to have a big gymnasium. We went to our church and said, can we start a co-op, a childcare co-op? And they loved the idea. We went to a bunch of our friends. And what we did was we got about eventually probably like 12 or 16 families. We ended up having like 2 sessions a month, but once a month we had a Saturday afternoon, evening where 2 of the couples would work, and we got kids from our youth group to volunteer as well. And we followed the childcare ratios of how many infants, and the parents that weren't working had a free date night. And the 2 families that worked provided dinner. We set like play yards up in the gymnasium. We had a movie going with a big screen. We had just all kinds of activities for the kids. And we had a free date once a month that we could count on. And as parents, it's so important to make sure, I know the other talk is on caregiving, but you have to make sure your relationships, whatever it is, if you're a single mom, you got to make sure that you have time for yourself and go out with a friend. But we found that was really crucial for us having a healthy marriage and keeping us sane. Just knowing that once a month we could count on that. So would highly recommend that.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. And maybe for the sake of time, we haven't been cut off yet, if anyone wants to come up. And also, since we're going to be limited on time, feel free to scan that QR code at the table. If you have other things like Stephanie to contribute to this topic, we could put together a one-pager with a snapshot to bring that all together in the platform as well.
Thank you for your presentation. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that I'm the proud aunt of Morgan Edwards, who's over there. I did have a question for you, and I was wondering if the foundation would ever come up with something as simple as like an index card with an overview of SATB2. Obviously, what we try to work with as our village, our family, is our identity is not SATB2. Our world is Morgan. But I do think we live in a wonderful, wonderful world of humanity always presents itself, but that there's always those few folks who don't understand, and I'm the aunt that will help them to understand, sometimes in a violent way if I have to. But I think probably the best way is education, because our morgie, at a quick glance, you wouldn't know that it's a child with SATB2. What you would think is it's a 7-year-old who's unruly or a brat, which makes me furious. So I was wondering, as I'm brainstorming, is there something that maybe the foundation could come up with that we could like you've been served your SATB2, for someone to shamefully educate themselves and read at a later date, whether it's on an airplane, in a restaurant, because my sister's still in that state of the guilt and the sadness, and even though the rest of us celebrate those tiny little milestones, my sister is still working through that. My brother-in-law is her support. So anyway, I was just wondering, I thought that might be a nice idea to maybe when somebody feels schmucky after I've served them, that maybe that might empower them to educate, have a conversation, change their behavior. So anyway, just a thought.
Thank you so much for that. I love the idea, and I'm already thinking, we have the one-pager for on the website, on the Facebook page, on the Gene website, Gene Foundation website, geared for families and caregivers, and then another one-pager for medical providers. I think we could pretty easily condense some of that info into an index card, like you were saying, and maybe that could even be coupled with like SATB2 Awareness Day. While we're all trying to get the word out, that might be a great thing to have in hand for that day as well, but could be used in other circumstances like you mentioned. So I'll definitely jot that one down and bring it back to the board.
And I will just say, I too have one sister-in-law who is a pit bull when it comes to advocating for Joe. We were on a bus at Disney at Christmas and there were no seats. And she stood up in the middle of the bus and said, "Excuse me, I have a disabled nephew here who needs a seat. Who's getting up?" I was mortified. 3 people raised their hands and one person sheepishly picked up their toddler and put her on his lap and was like, "Here you go." And thankfully Joe played the part because he was really tired. He can sit upright, but he chose that moment to slump down and force me to hold him up. And I was like, "Thanks, buddy." Like making this more and more guilt-ridden for all the people who didn't. So yeah, I've got a pit bull and she's wonderful. So thank you for your service to your family. We can arrange a meeting, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Sure, we could make it even more friendly. All right, thank you all so much.
Hey guys, we're gonna flip, since we're doing a lot of roundtables, we're gonna put the roundtables in here, the roundtables that were scheduled for, oh, you're so official. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my spot on here. Yes. All roundtables in here? All right, all roundtables in here. The ABA will be in Portia and Wisteria.